In the coming months, Oklahoma City will be adding more chlorine to the city's water supply. This is being done to fight off something called trihalomethane, a chemical the Environmental Protection Agency says will cause cancer. The Water Department says the higher chlorine level should not harm drinking water, but tropical fish owners should avoid using the chlorine-treated water. Right now, chlorine levels in the city's water supply are normal, and officials say they will let the public know when the water is being specially treated.
We will be doing some other things to try to determine the best method to reduce or eliminate trihalomethanes from the water. And as we take those steps, and it might inject something else into the water that might cause a difference in odor or taste, we will be advising the public of those steps prior to any real implementation.
Chemicals will always be used to purify water. The Water Department says it could use a more expensive purification system that won't affect the water's taste so much. However, it would affect you later when you have to pay higher water bills. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
For farmers, the biggest struggle is not in yielding a product, but a profit. Survival on the farm has become a major concern. In recent years, farmers have plowed through political issues as well as their crops. In the next few days, the Oklahoma Farm Bureau will vote on 77 proposals. Some of the proposed policies are not farm issues, such as a recommendation for a 2-cent tax increase on road fuel.
We need to support our highways and bridges before they deteriorate to the point that it's it's stupid to let them go completely downhill. And besides that, a farmer running a truck over a deteriorated road costs him maybe more than 2 cents a gallon on the fuel he runs through that truck if the road were smooth.
Lockett says farmers are beginning to voice concern over more than just farm issues. He says in addition to a tax increase recommendation, the Farm Bureau is proposing numerous tax cuts. If members of the Farm Bureau approve the proposed policies, they will take their suggestions to state lawmakers. Debbie Mash, Action 4.
The silence of this northwest Oklahoma City neighborhood was shattered by a series of gunshots shortly before 7 this morning. A few minutes later, a neighbor found the body of a 63-year-old white male inside his mobile home. His battered body bore the signs of a life and death struggle. Oklahoma City police officers sealed off the area. Their search for a suspect concentrated along the heavily wooded banks of the North Canadian River. They had a strong suspicion the killer had not gotten very far. After 3 hours of searching, a police helicopter crew captured the armed suspect. He's been identified as 30-year-old Glenn Byron Galloway. Galloway was the victim's neighbor.
According to the neighbors in the area, the people that we've interviewed, the suspect had been acting erratically for several days. And this morning apparently came to the victim's residence and forced his way into the residence.
After interviewing the victim's neighbors, police detectives still have no clear motive for the murder. Scott Wallace, Action 4, Northwest Oklahoma City.
Have you seen the 1983 Z28 yet? Let me show you a little bit about this.
I'm Debbie Mash. The automobile industry is also taking a turn for the better.
Ooh, this is nice.
Car dealers across the state report an increase in sales during the past few months. The upswing in sales comes in the wake of a financially disastrous time for the auto industry. But many dealers say their outlook is now as positive as it is cautious. Specifically, General Motors reports an increase in sales of almost 30% during the past few months. Local dealers say low interest rate incentives have driven 82 models off the lot.
When you can talk about savings of $1,600 on an interest program, it's difficult then to say that, well, I think I'll buy an 83. But GM did it purposely because to get the consumer involved, to get the dealer involved, and to increase their 82 sales and clean up their inventory. I'm a realistically optimistic person, and I believe that realistically it will be a good year. Optimistically, it might be a super year.
Smikla says the car industry, and specifically General Motors, are getting back on their feet because of a healthier economy and car improvements. He says the automobile industry's financial fight may be in the 11th round, but they'll win in 83. Debbie Mash, Action 4.
Word's out that the 1983 state legislature won't be able to give Oklahoma teachers a pay raise. The 82 legislature voted the teachers an average $2,000 increase, but the money is simply not there this time. The reason for the gloomy forecast can be attributed to one thing. Recent projections of the state's revenue is way down. But the latest figures also show something else. There are 3,400 vacant teaching positions across the state. Some education officials blame that on low pay.
Part of the problem is that if we continue to pay teachers below that level, we are going to lose teachers, and therefore we are not even going to be able to keep positions that we now have. It's imperative that the teachers do get a raise when we don't lose any more people to business any longer.
There are other problems as well. Math and science are two courses that demand a lot of individual attention. In some cases, students will not receive that extra instruction due to the lack of qualified personnel and the overall shortage of teachers. But while problems persist, Oklahoma is still a desirable place to teach.
Yes, I do. I want very much to stay here. I enjoy being a teacher, and I like the school I'm at, I like the district I'm in. As far as staying or leaving is concerned, I just have to weigh everything out. I have to look at what my expenses are and look at what my income is and just decide if my income is great enough to meet my expenses.
Education officials are hoping that today's forecast was premature and that a raise of some kind can still be gained. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
Within the decade, Oklahoma's teaching force may switch from surplus to shortage. Many teacher training classes like this one at Central State are far from capacity. The number of students seeking teaching degrees is at an all-time low. The National Education Agency is predicting a teacher shortage by 1990.
Teaching does not have the same respect that it had maybe 10 or 15 years ago, as well as the economy in Oklahoma has been very good, and we've had a lot of people choose to go into business and industry rather than into teaching.
Central State University has one of the largest teacher training courses in the state. But from 1972 to 1982, there has been a drop of 50% in the number of students seeking a degree in elementary education. History degrees in teacher education have also dropped dramatically. And science degrees in teacher education have plunged to only one graduate. The total number of teaching degrees granted at Central State during the last 10 years has dropped by almost 70%. Those statistics echo the trend nationwide. The National Education Agency predicts a total shortage of 783,000 teachers by 1990. Debbie Mash, Action 4 at Central State University.
Oh my, Robbie has one.
It's not Broadway, but it's better than a boring school assembly, especially when the target audience is 12 to 20 years old, and the message is, don't take drugs. This show is being staged by policemen, believe it or not, policemen who care about teenage drug abuse. The show is based on entertainment, but that entertaining theme is only there to capture the attention of the audience. The real theme is very serious, deadly serious to a group of impressionable youngsters. The officers who've given their time, money, and energy to this show say the fun and games will hopefully teach the teens that even cops can have fun and teach the dangers of drug abuse at the same time.
Most of the time when we run across a situation with a teenager, like I said, it's already been too late to pre-warn them. The accident's already happened. They've already hit the tree and they've drank the alcohol or they've taken the dope. What we want to do is talk to them beforehand and just try to, be good teachers and show them some things that's happened in the past out here on the streets and let them see that we're not against them, we're for them.
If you'd like to help policemen who care, call 747-9047. Dan Slocum, Action 4.
Oklahoma City Public Schools will fare much better this month than many of the rural schools. Even though the governor has ordered the cutback, Oklahoma City school officials have the time and the funds to regroup. There was a $3 million surplus from last year that will be used to combat the $400,000 drop in funding. But what school officials are worried about the most is the future.
We would hope that we would have some information of a more permanent nature, of a long-range nature, so that we can tell what's going to happen at the end of the year. If they come in next month and say we're going to cut 6% and the following month they're going to cut 13%, this is going to keep us confused and we won't know how to plan. And so what we'll have to do is do our planning for the very worst situation, which may mean that we'd have to freeze vacancies, freeze expenditure funds, and not buy things that would help us in order to operate for the balance of the year.
In state colleges, the cutbacks will be felt, but not severely. The normal cutbacks in purchasing and expenses will be enforced, but state regents are prepared for that and speculate any further cuts will be dealt with in the same positive manner. But the regents also insist that the quality of education must not be lowered because of monetary difficulties, and they are vowing to take any action necessary to make sure that does not happen. Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
We continue to have financial problems in meeting the allocations as were appropriated by the legislature.
Today's cuts came as no surprise to most state agencies. Take, for instance, Oklahoma City Public Schools. Not only was this month's cutback expected, but the OKC Public Schools have a cash reserve and the time to regroup. From last year alone, there's a $3 million surplus. That will be used to combat this month's $400,000 cut. Rural schools may not fare as well. The Department of Corrections will suffer. The Corrections Department has been battling overcrowding for some time now. As the prison population continues to grow, so does the budget. And with a cutback, the current problems will only worsen. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol will feel the cutback, but not severely, they say. The patrol will be keeping a close eye on expenditures, but the agency doesn't expect any layoffs or cutbacks in services.
We've always maintained a situation where we can provide adequate services. That's the last thing that we would cut under any circumstance, and the governor's always been very cognizant of the need for law enforcement, and I don't think it's going to come to that.
The big question now, just how many months will these cutbacks continue? Governor Nigh is optimistic.
I'm very hopeful that the economy will return to a more strong position. We're very hopeful that the Christmas season plays an important role in the economy of the state of Oklahoma, and that the future monthly allocations will not so be affected.
The decision on further cutbacks will be made on a month-to-month basis. Dan Slocum, Action 4.
1982 has been a tough year for Amarex. The company reported a net loss of more than $2.9 million for the first quarter. That's compared to a net income of more than $1 million in that same quarter just a year ago. The reduced demand for natural gas and sagging new gas contracts are partially to blame. Amarex participated in the drilling of 69 wells during the first quarter of this year. Only 18 of those wells were completed, including 8 gas wells, 1 oil well, and 9 dry holes. Today, General Counsel for Amarex, Bob Isaac, explained that 4 of Amarex's minor creditors forced the company into Chapter 7. The total debt facing Amarex is estimated to be in the neighborhood of $300 million. But the 4 creditors that filed against the firm only represent less than 1% of that total debt. The action by these 4 well servicing companies forced Amarex to seek voluntary protection under Chapter 11.
As of 2:30 this afternoon, the order converting this matter from an involuntary 7 to a Chapter 11 reorganization has been entered by Judge Berry in the bankruptcy court. So as of this point in time, Amarex is a company debtor in possession under Chapter 11.
More than 150 Amarex employees will be on the job Monday morning. The Amarex situation is that of debtor in possession. The company will continue to function. But times are tough in the oil and gas business, and officials here are not ready to predict if the company will ever be solvent. At Amarex, Kurt Autry, Action 4.
Being selected to play for the Oklahoma Sooners is something special. The competition for the starting lineup is fierce. Being an OU cheerleader is also special, and the competition is just as fierce. This year there are 10 women cheerleaders. 4 of them are black. Next year there will be 6 men and 6 women. Of the 5 black women and 2 black men who tried out 2 weeks ago for next year's squad, only 1 woman was selected. Susan Stinson has been a cheerleader for 3 years. She wasn't selected for next year's squad, and Stinson says there were improprieties in the first round of judging. She said racial references were made on several scoring sheets, and that judges were allowed to write their scores in pencil and then make erasures later. Normally, scoring is done in ink.
Sexual discrimination, it was racial discrimination, and it was just overall human discrimination.
Stinson said Ron Wilson told the tryout group that OU cheerleaders should project a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, all-American image. Wilson is assistant to the Vice President of Student Affairs. We tried to interview him, but Wilson's secretary said he would be in meetings all day and wouldn't be able to talk to us. Wilson has ordered new tryouts tomorrow. He's been reported as saying it's not because of racism, but because of procedural errors in the first round. Bill Ross, Action 4 in Norman.
Everybody look at the Christmas tree, and you flip the switch. There it is. Merry Christmas. Okay, thank you very much. Now.
There's your Oklahoma City tree. How about that? Wasn't that?
Oh, some crap where I gotta hug that.
For more than 3 months, the gates at the Seminole Tribal Complex in Wewoka have been chained shut. They're only opened when one of the guards says it's okay. It's all because of a dispute between two men who claim to be chief. Jim Milam and his followers control the complex. But Edward Tanyan says the tribal council voted Milam out and that he, Tanyan, is the rightful chief. On November 29th, the D.C. court ruled the Oklahoma hearing had to be postponed until after the Milam trial. That trial began today. Milam has asked that the Bureau of Indian Affairs be enjoined from interfering in Seminole tribal matters. Milam says the Bureau favors Tanyan. The Bureau says it's neutral. Milam partially bases his charge on this memorandum written a year ago. He says it raises questions about the Secretary of the Interior's policy when the BIA has a dispute with tribal leaders. The memo phrases current policy this way, quote, "What the BIA must do in these situations when it wants to flex its muscles is to withdraw recognition of all tribal officers."
Leaders of the various Indian tribes have felt like that the Bureau of Indian Affairs had a hidden policy by which they operated, and this evidently is a copy of it.
But Cecil Shipp, the director of the Wewoka BIA, says he's never heard of such a hidden policy, and he doesn't believe it exists. The author of the memorandum is Scott Keep. We tried to contact Mr. Keep in Washington earlier this week. He never returned our calls. And of course today, he's in federal court for the Milam lawsuit. Bill Ross, Action 4.
And if the state has no objection...
It was the second day of testimony in Bobby Standridge's preliminary hearing. The only witnesses were more police officers who had investigated the kidnapping and killing of Tammy Carter last March. Standridge's court-appointed attorney, Joe Lankford, questioned the thoroughness of the investigation. He wondered how many other people were investigated as suspects and why they were ruled out while his client and the two other men brought to trial in the manner were not. Lankford's major point of attack in the 2 days of testimony has been the validity of the prosecution's physical evidence.
And did you find that his fingerprints matched any of those that were the unknown prints?
No, I could not make an identification with the defendant.
Were you able to form an opinion as to whether or not any of the latent prints given to you were those of the defendant, Bobby Joe Standridge?
No. I could not make any correlation or identification.
Okay.
Lankford didn't believe the state had proven they had a case against Standridge and asked the court to dismiss it. The court said no. but Lankford did win the right of access to some police files and records on the investigation. The court bound Standridge over to trial at mid-afternoon and ordered him back to court on January 5th. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at the Cleveland County Courthouse.
Used, you know, to keep things going, but the problem, I think it's at least a step in the right direction, and I think the fact that by him coming out with this, that at least indicates that he does realize that there is a problem out here in agriculture, and that at least they are looking for a solution.
Faces when they get that heavy. I mean,
"21-year-old Robert Daniel Rogers of Portsmouth, Virginia, was arrested and charged last night with the Friday robbery of an Oklahoma City bank. Rogers stood before U.S. Magistrate Paul Lindsay about 1:20 this afternoon. Lindsay decided to give formal arraignment on Monday at 1:30 because of a lack of legal representation for Rogers. Yesterday, the Northwest National Bank, located on North May Avenue, was robbed about noon. The bank cameras took this picture of a man dressed in a green poncho, ski mask, and carrying a small silver-colored gun. The man ordered everyone on the floor and then fled with an undisclosed amount of cash. When Rogers was arrested, the FBI found a quantity of money and a gun believed used in the robbery.
Left. We should keep him left and to the right. Down by the elevators.
Kevin Ogle, Action 4.
Why don't we just keep going because we need to see Judge Howard.
Ask me and I'll give you a secret on how you can get it back. 3 board resignations, and you can forget it.
Okay. In response to that direct request, and that statement is, as president of this board, I Motion's made by Mr. Montgomery and seconded by Mr. Brown.
What I was just telling you. Right. It's a more. You will see a resolve on the part of a lot of people to become more active in their schools, to keep a much closer watch on their boards of education.
Oklahoma City police officers used deadly force 14% more in 1982 than they did in 81. There were 40 incidents involving the use of deadly force in 82 compared to 35 last year. However, while the overall rate went up, the unjustified use of deadly force decreased by 33%. Oklahoma City police officials were pleased with that, saying that 4 out of 40 speaks well for the department. But there are some organizations that believe the laws governing the use of deadly force should be changed.
The position of the ACLU is that to safeguard all the people in the state of Oklahoma and not harm the efforts of the police to bring good law enforcement, the state law should be changed to require that bodily injury is imminent before the police can use deadly force.
But according to police officials, a lessening of laws would only mean another advantage for the criminals.
The criminal must understand and know and realize that they're violating the law, and if they're committing a felony, and then they could be fatally injured. And if we lessen that law, or if we do something that restricts the enforcement of the laws, then we're only asking for more problems as far as I'm concerned, because now they're still committing them. And think what would happen if we put less strength into that law.
Kevin Ogle, Action 4.